Hey everyone, what's going on? It's David Hamilton, and today I have a very special interview with Tripp Lanier. He is a men's coach. He helps men find more meaning, more fulfillment, more success in their lives, and I'm really excited for what we have on tap for you today. So welcome, Tripp.
Thanks a lot, David. I'm glad to be able to do this with you. We've had a little technical problems, but hopefully we can mow through it.
It's going to go smooth all the way through. I can feel it.
Let's do it.
And if it doesn't, we'll work through it. We'll work through it together as men. So great to have you. Met you through some common connections of some really cool people that I know, really cool, authentic people. And so I'm just curious, tell us some of your story and what got you to where you are today, becoming a men's coach, and what's been part of your journey, what's been important to you.
I was fortunate early on to create a successful business, and I created from early on, it was about designing my business to serve the lifestyle that I had or that I wanted, and which was I wanted to be able to travel around and play music, and I wanted to not starve by playing music. And I wanted a business that allowed me to make money whether I was in the office or not, but I also wanted that business to be creative. And I did that in my 20s, but also the other side of it was that I built it to a point where it was not satisfying for me, that even though it ticked off a lot of boxes that I thought would have me really feel fulfilled, it was missing something. And so I got to go through that midlife crisis, so to speak. I got to go through that pretty early on in my late 20s and realize at that point that I wanted to do something more meaningful. I wanted to do something that it wasn't just fun for me. It was something that helped others. And I loved having real conversations about what really mattered and what was very exciting or what was more empowering for other people too. I wanted to be a part of that. And so that's how I found coaching. That's how I got into working with men through various kinds of men's circles and men's groups and that kind of stuff. And inevitably, I started a podcast out of all of that, and my just real hungry appetite to learn learn about what really matters and what really makes a difference in our lives.
That's great. And so, yeah, I didn't know that part, that you had this very successful business and really had that moment where I'm imagining, and I'd like to actually hear about it, that was kind of like, oh shit, what have I done? A little bit is what it sounds like. Well, and what was that? Can you tell us a little more about what that experience was like for you? Because a lot of guys, that of course they think the money, the women, the power, the fame, the success, whatever it is, then I'll be fulfilled. And as we both know, it doesn't quite work that way.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little more about the specifics of what that was like for you, just to give guys a sense of that?
Yeah, it was essentially that. It was realizing, well, wait a second, there's something, I on the one column, I've got all of these great things that are happening. I'm very grateful for that, but I'm not quite ticking the box. There's something that's missing. There's something that's not quite there. And the part of that was difficult is I was like, well, there must be something wrong with me. If I'm not satisfied, then there must be something wrong with me. I must be neurotic, or I'm like fill in the blank of some kind of judgment. Why can't you just be happy? Why you got to be a downer? Like, just do what everybody else is doing. And I went through that phase of, well, there must be just something wrong with me. If I'm checking off all these boxes and I'm not satisfied, I'm not fulfilled, that means something's wrong with me. And I got over that pretty quickly. And when I just started to explore more of the world and start to find people that were creating extraordinary lifestyles, but they were also doing things that meant more to them, and they were making some kind of an impact in the world. And a lot of my life up to that point was just about me. It was about my music or my business or my money or whatever. And I think that's a natural part of development, but our society doesn't really go much beyond like me or my family. There's not a lot that really gets celebrated in saying, hey, if you really want to feel great in your life, it's because you're doing something more meaningful. You're doing something that not only impacts you, but it impacts others as well. And that's where I felt most alive. That's where I felt more peace and more fulfillment. And so it was just about making that bold decision to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to orient my life towards this. I'm going to have more of this in my life, whatever that may be.
Yeah. And so kind of what I'm feeling, sensing, hearing is that it's not all it's cut out to be, the success that looks so good on the outside, and a lot of times where it's kind of like, well, the person is just a person like you, and they still have the same fears and all this, but there are points where that maybe it's not so good on the inside, and they're trying to keep it together or whatever, right? And so I could also hear some guys hearing this and go, well, yeah, I find the meaning in this and that, but don't I have to make money too? Don't What if I want a relationship? If I want these more external things versus the internal meaning? Um, is it the whole picture together? Is the meaning more important, for you and for when you work with guys? And do things extend from there? Are there guys who say, they're like, hey, I made this million, I'm going to be a school teacher, I'm not going to make that much money, but that is my meaning and purpose, and I'm good with that? Or, you know what I mean? There's that kind of dichotomy a lot of times I think we're conditioned in, of be happy and unsuccessful, or be successful and unhappy.
Yeah, I never bought into that. I've enjoyed having money in my life. It makes it fun. I tend to live better when I know that my bills are paid, and having money in my life means I don't have to worry about money. It doesn't, when I'm not, there have been times when I haven't had money and I was worrying about it. It was something that was in my focus. It was something that I was thinking about a lot. And I like the fact that when money's happening and that part of my life is handled, I get to be more creative. I get to spend more time focused on the thing that I want to do. The people that I know that kind of poo-poo money are the ones that are usually thinking about it a lot and worrying about it a lot. And a lot of their creative energy is zapped by that. So I don't see it as either or. And I just see it as, where do I have the most fun? Well, when I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm also getting paid well for it. That's really fun for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love that, and that it frees up to serve more, to impact more, when money is not an issue. Opens up the creativity. And as I think we share some common mentors, Steve Chandler and Rich Litvin have helped show me this. And I've had to work through a lot of money stuff, and still working through some money stuff, but it's much easier. Um, and so I actually love hearing that you like, "Man, I never had an issue with it." I don't believe in that dichotomy. I think that's awesome, because it can be any way that it looks, I guess, any way that we create it, any way that
Well,
we.
the issue, how it's shown up for me is there's just varying degrees. Like the thermostat goes up, and it's like, oh, okay, well now I'm at this place, and that's my comfort zone, and then I may outgrow that, or I'll start to bump up against that. So it's not so much that I don't have challenges or limitations around certain money things, but invariably as my rates go up, there's a part of me that's like really contracts. It's like, oh my gosh, there's nobody's going to say yes to this rate, and then they do, and I'm like, oh, there's no way I can do that. 6 months later, I'm like, it's no big deal. It's just so that I've just recognized that that's the same with anything we do in our lives, that it's just another growth edge. And what was once terrifying becomes the norm a few months later, if we're willing to just stick with it. And it's true, like when we work out, we're physically things that scared us or were tense for us or challenging for us. If we stay on that growth path, then that edge just keeps moving along. The number is actually irrelevant.
Yeah, and I think this is the way the conversation is occurring to me now is this thing about fear and edge and comfort zone, which is such a fascinating thing to me. And I've gone to places of, you got to push your comfort zone to the comfort zone's all made up. It's just in your head, and if you can overcome that, then it'll disappear. What are your thoughts on fear and comfort zone, especially as men, and growing and going to our edges, which is at times very much seems part of the game, and at times I also go, how am I making this crap up, and just do it, man?
I think the biggest thing, and it's an overly simple concept, but what I've noticed is that unconsciously, I have a desire to get more and more comfortable. Like that's natural. I'm seeking more and more comfort, which is different than ease. But I'm seeking more and more comfort. I'm looking for ways to be less confronting or less challenging. And if we look around, that's what we're all on that path, and that's our default. Is how do we remove discomfort from our life? How do we remove challenge from our life? We just want things to get easier in that way, and that's not bad or wrong. But if we understand that what we truly want in our lives is to feel more alive and to have a sense of impact or meaning or fulfillment, whatever you want to call it, that requires being on a growth path. And that means instead of avoiding places where we're challenged, it means that we seek them, and not in a self-flagellating way, like, all right, I'm gonna go do this crazy thing just because I'll grow. It's more like, where's the next level? Like, where is it more of a sense of wholeness for myself? Where do I get to be more me? Instead of, okay, well, that would be more me, but that's uncomfortable, so I'm going to make my life smaller. So that to me is just, we find those opportunities to grow when we realize, oh, this is where I can be bigger in my life. And I'm not talking about in terms of accomplishments or in terms of achievements. It's more of where I just get to be more of who I am. Create more freedom for myself. And when we realize that that's just normal, like nobody goes to the gym and like, well, I hope I don't have any discomfort doing my workout today. Like I know guys that are like, well, if I didn't have any discomfort, if I didn't feel the burn, then I didn't get a workout. And it's like, well, apply that to your life and just recognize that the good stuff is on the other side of that healthy burn and it's temporary. Then guys start to get it. They're like, oh yeah, now I get it. I've been seeking I've been seeking comfort. I've been seeking a way to get away from that challenge and that discomfort and tension of growth. And instead of looking for it, say, well, where can I find that? Because I get to be more of myself on the other side of that. And once we understand that, I think it gets a little easier, because a lot of us are thinking, well, if I'm feeling that discomfort, I must be doing something wrong. If I have tension in a relationship, it must mean that something is wrong here, instead of, oh, this is where we grow. This is where I get to be more honest with you. This is where you get to be more honest with me, instead of, what do I do to make sure that I don't rock the boat here? So if we can learn to reinterpret that tension, we can start to see that the gold's on the other side of it.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Very cool. What's really I'm curious about now is this, being more of who you are, authenticity, all these, you know, somewhat tricky terms depending on very tricky,
Very slippery.
from different perspectives. What do you mean by that? What does that mean for you and guys you work with? Like, how do they know they're being more of who they are? What's an indicator for that, and is it just because of, pushing past their comfort zone and it's something they really want to do? Or, the big question, who am I, if we go very spiritually deep, and take a look. But from what you're talking about, I hear there's a certain sense of that. So I'm curious of what that means.
Yeah, a big context for the work that I do with guys is recognizing that no matter what they're trying to do, whether it's more money, or they want a certain relationship, or they want to live in a certain kind of a environment, or they want to have a certain community, or they want to cure cancer, or whatever it is that unconsciously or consciously, but most of the time it's unconscious, they've said that if I do these things, then I'm going to feel more free. I'm going to feel more love. I'm going to feel more able to love, and I'm going to have more love in my life. I'm going to feel more alive, and I'm going to feel more at peace. And so I help them realize that, I like to help them imagine that there are these gauges on their dashboard: freedom, love, passion, and peace, and start to pay attention to them. Because if we dissociate from that and we just go by, okay, I've made a certain amount of money and I've got a certain amount of body fat or whatever, like what a lot of guys do, right? Then whatever, like it's supposed to just kind of work out. It's supposed to pan out. But I'm constantly helping them come back to, what would have you feel more free today? What would have you feel more love today? What would have you feel more alive today? What would have you feel more peace today? And as they build that awareness, they start to course correct their lives as they go, instead of waiting for it to be on the other side of some achievement, instead of waiting for it to be on the other side of some ideal that they've achieved. Oh, once I'm authentic, whatever that hell that means, right? Then I'm going to have all these things. So I like to come back, well, what would have you feel more free today? Well, what would have me feel more free is I could have this conversation with this person. What would have me feel more alive? I get out of my office and go for a swim or go surfing or something. So they start to realize that they're in the driver's seat of the experiences they most want to have. And they don't have to wait until it's on the other side of some big accomplishment or on top of some mountain for themselves. They create it as they go. And that's a big part of the work, is just having that awareness. So whatever label you want to put on it, the authenticity and all this other kind of stuff, I don't pay attention to that. It's really just brass tacks. What's going to have you feel more free? What's going to have you feel more love? What's going to have you feel more alive? And what's going to have you feel more peace today?
Awesome. Virtual fist bump. Love it. That's awesome, man. I love that because part of my journey has been, well, how much am I making up in my head? I went through a big phase of that. And so I could enjoy life without having to do anything. Then I got a little bored of that. And I was like, well, there's no difference between, what if there's no difference between what's going on in my head and what I'm doing? It's all one continuous flow. And I just go and do that thing that makes me feel alive. There's no difference between the idea and the concept of me doing it. And I love hearing that that's, it's that achievement wall, that constant Sisyphus metaphor. I got to push the boulder to the top, right? And then roll it back down and do it all again. And I get to feel fulfilled for like, half a minute. And then it's going to take me another week to push the boulder up the hill.
Right.
And I'll get that. Woo! Can't wait. So that's awesome, man. I really love that. In what you had sent over to me in an email about what you do, you mentioned connection, the word connection. And I'm really curious about that. When I work with guys that are shy and all this, they want to connect with people more. And then I also talk about, well, you got to be connected to yourself. That's how it's really going to happen. It's going to happen so much more easily if you connect to yourself more. Right. How does connection play into this? And what does that mean for you and helping a guy, all that kind of stuff?
Well, let's define what connection means in this context. And the way that I like to describe it is just, imagining this idea of two people hitting a ball back and forth. It's when I hear what you're saying and I'm hearing what you're saying. So you could say whatever you want to me and I might not get it. I can be like, this guy's fucking crazy, like whatever. And we're not going to have a connection. You can tell me something and I can get it, but then that might be it. And you'll be like, well, I don't know if he got it or not. I don't know if we've got a connection or not. So when you tell me something and I get it and I let you know that I get it, now we've got a loop. Now we're starting to create something. And if I can add something to it and you get it, now we've got this beautiful exchange starting to happen. And that's where we start to come together. And it's like, hey, this guy's like me and I'm like him and we can relate on these things. Or even if we don't get along or we don't see, I get where he's coming from and he gets where I'm coming from. And we can start to develop this depth. And so that to me is what's at just the most basic. I like to teach that with for a guy. So he can just start to be a better listener to himself, but then also with others as he's engaging with others. And start to just recognize something really magical happens when you just feedback somebody like, oh, so you really don't like lobster. And like, yeah, no, I don't really like lobster. You really get me. There's some like excitement that happens there when we feel that somebody gets where we're coming from. And that's it on the most basic level. And then it's just learning how to take that deeper and deeper.
It's reminding me of that ad once. There's this guy driving a car and he's like, I just feedback what they say. But I know that's what you're talking about. But he's like, yeah. And I get along and I get by my life and but he's not the guy you want to be. And that's not what you're talking about. That's the beginning of it. Because I'm guessing there has to be an element of really, you've got to really hear it. You could just feed it back and go, right? And I know that you're talking about something deeper here, that it's more than that. There's a drawing in of.
Yeah, so if you add a layer of accessibility in there, right? Or some people might say vulnerability, but it's just where I open up. So I can just sit here and feedback what you're saying, like a robot therapist type guy, like, oh, so your mother was this way, right? You're like, yeah, okay. But he's walled himself off. And it's another thing to be like, geez, man, when you said that, I really, that was a big, like I felt that, like I really got that. And he was like, yeah, me too. Like there's a thing where I get to see how what I'm doing has impacted you and you share that as well. Yeah, I'm sure there's some guys that'll somehow figure out how to make that robotic and systematized. But when we integrate that and just the way that we're being, it's not only letting the other person know that we're getting where they're coming from, but it's also sharing what's happening for us. And that's where the other ball gets to go back and we get to do this exchange back and forth.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I've, done some of that stuff and some of that type of relating. And it builds a connection really quickly. And you really like, whoa, here we are together.
Yeah, I mean, if we're willing to learn this, we can, as a coach, I can go very deeply with someone very quickly within 10, 15 minutes. If they're willing to go there, we can go very deeply, very quickly, and we don't have to. I think a lot of people think that the friendship has to take a long time to develop, and that may be true, but it's also just how willing am I to show up and to be honest about what's going on for me, and can the other person play with me too? And if that's the case, if we both learn these skills, then we can go very deep very quickly. We don't have to wait 2 or 3 years for us to be friends before we can share this stuff. It's just like anything else, we can learn.
Yeah. So as you know, as coaches, there's times where that is like getting to the truth of someone so then they can move through, move forward, be where they're at. But then there's times where I've found that can be like, they think, well, I feel like this and that, and it's just like a self-victimizing story. What's the difference between hitting that point of truth that somebody is covering over versus, you know, or somebody even making that into what's true for them and becoming like a self-victimizing story? What's the edge of the line there that's, you know, you're kind of like, okay, now we know, but now do you really want to be there or not? You know, like, how do you, because
That's a great question right there.
Yeah.
Oh, so here you are. This is your story. You know, this is, your life is this way because such and such is happening, or so and so did this and that. Is that what you want? That's a great question. And because the way that we step out of a victim mindset is to start to answer the question, what do I want? The victim, that powerless place, is focusing on our problems. It's focusing on what's wrong. And it's not making the effort to say, here's what I want. It's expecting the world to figure that out for us and to do it for us. So if we're friends or we're coaches, we can play the role of the support and say, yeah, I get you. And then we can also play the role of the challenger and say, well, what do you want? I get that this sucks for you. Is this what you want? And then that can start another conversation. And I get kind of rough with my guys sometimes, but they understand that it's from a place of love. There's I'm not going to help them stay in the place where they're powerless. I'm not going to help them stay in the mindset that keeps them small. I'm not getting paid to help them with that.
Right. We're not getting paid to be their friends.
Right. Yeah.
And just keep it all nice and keep it.
Yeah. And there's a relief there. There's a part of them that's like, oh, thank God, you know, like, I don't have to stay here. This is really painful. This is hard to stay in this place. And so even though that moment might be challenging, and it might be challenging for me as a coach to go and rock the boat, there's a part of them that's like, oh, it just feels so much better to get on the other side of this. I have a lot of my clients say, fuck you, Tripp. And then they have the smile on their face and they're saying thank you at the same time, but they're just like, damn it, thank you. Fuck, asshole, right? You know, it's like, but that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I mean, and it sort of doesn't matter the way, as long as what I'm hearing, but what I'm feeling too is when I work with people is that they're feeling more alive, they're feeling more engaged, they're feeling more woken up to the fact that they were in a slumber or sleep, like we all have done, like I've done plenty of my life, and there's still more waking up to do. It's the journey, it seems like. So I'm curious, what are you excited about these days? What are you engaged in that has you feeling alive?
Well, I'm in the process of buying a home with my family, and that's exciting. We've designed our life to have a lot of freedom and to be able to choose how we wanted to live, and we've lived in a lot of different locations over the last few years. And so the idea of switching that and living in a place where, okay, this is going to be Team Lanier headquarters, this is going to be our home base, that's exciting. You know, planning a way to be in Costa Rica or Hawaii for a couple of months this winter is exciting. Finding ways to, you know, invite my clients into that process and into that kind of a place with me and deepen in that way. That's exciting. And just my own development as a coach, and my own development as having what I coach mirror the development that I'm going through as I get more and more into my own spiritual and personal development. And just, that's been a challenge. Like I'm in a coaching group, I'm leading a coaching group now. And I took a risk the other day and said, look, here's where I'm coming from. This is what has me doing this. And this is what I believe. Now you can choose to believe this or not. And I shared that with them, and I just kind of expected them to be like, oh, whatever, I don't get it. And they were all like, oh my God, that's amazing. And it was one of those things that I would have withheld. because I didn't think that they would be on the same page. And it seems ridiculous now, but at the time it was one of those things like, can I be that honest too? Can I bring that too? And my willingness to go there has us be even more close, has us be willing to go even deeper with one another. So it's just finding those little places where it's like, oh, this doesn't fit anymore. Let's get rid of this and see what happens. And that makes it more fun. It's risky, it's edgy. It's that like, oh, this is uncomfortable, but that's where the good stuff is.
Yeah, that's the authentic stuff, right? But hey, but no, it builds the trust. It brings it closer, and I love. Yeah, it's a lesson for me too, is doing this. It's like having gone through a bunch of shyness, social anxiety, awkwardness, all that, and then still running into those edges sometimes, running into, wait, I'm supposed to be the guy that never feels that, right? It's not
Good
supposed to
luck.
happen. They can't know this. And at the same time, it's just not that big a deal like it used to be. It's like, whatever, human, blah, blah, blah. We have our things that come up.
Well, isn't that it, right? It's not the perfection thing, because I get people that project shit onto me, or at least I imagine they're projecting stuff onto me from time to time about, if I'm a coach or if I'm writing this or I'm interviewing these people, like I've got to know this stuff. And the reality is like I'm in this place because I'm learning too. Like I'm in this position as well, and it's really just more about how can we be more resilient? How can we bounce back faster? It's not about the perfection. And I find that I relax a lot more and they relax a lot more when they realize that's really the game, is to just get back up better than it is about avoiding falling off all the time.
Yeah, I love that. I still spend time resisting, the fact that I go into a down place, even though I bounce back up more than higher. I love that resilience word, but I still will spend time feeling that negativity, feeling that angst, feeling that depression, feeling that anxiety, whatever it is that's coming up. It still happens, but it just doesn't dominate my life anymore. And I think that's a message for the guys out here too. That's like, we're not perfect. Yes, a lot of times we're a symbol of hope. I get those emails, you give me so much hope and this and that. And I'm like, okay, now what are you doing about it? Right. The coach goes, great. Now what are you going to do? So, and that projection thing. Yeah. And I have to watch it too, because then I can fall into believing those projections, being like, okay, now I've really got to be this perfect guy, the blah, but just bullshit stuff, bullshit stories.
Come live with my wife for a while. She'll make sure you don't fall for your own shit.
Bam. She is. I loved her from the moment I worked with her in the AMP program. She was just like, she's like, yeah, she's like, oh, that's on. And like, I'm not buying that. It was that or this. It was no in between.
Good for you.
So, when it comes to, have you ever worked with like a shy guy, socially anxious guys that have really struggled with that at all, or something along those lines? Because I'm curious for the guys here that would be watching, and there's women watching too, but I'm really focusing, narrowing on helping the shy guys these days. How do you view shyness, social anxiety, things like this? Because I know it comes up for everybody in a certain way, and the people that come to me and come to this YouTube channel and come to all the stuff I do, it's the predominant issue as they see it. They see it as predominant, where other people might go, oh, I feel a little social anxiety, but they're not really in the same spot. And I've had people go, oh, I have social anxiety too. I'm like, doesn't really, they're more doing it more in a relating sense. Like, I like what you do, more than they're like, it's a huge issue, because generally those people aren't going to be around out, in a public place a lot of times hanging out and stuff. So how do you see, is it no different than being afraid of starting a business, and being in that phase? Well, if I get this handled, then my life will be good. You know what I mean?
The way that I approach these types of things, and sometimes, it helps to work with a therapist. It helps to work with, sometimes these behaviors are rooted in patterns that go way back, that have something to do with history. And I think it's helpful if they're willing to take a look at it from that perspective. So I don't think coaching is a replacement for that. And it's often that coaching can work hand in hand with some form of therapy, some form of healing, So I will take a look at that, and I want to know that it's really just what's going to help this guy the best. And so it's not uncommon. I've worked with guys that they've seen a therapist and then they'll come see me, or maybe we'll work together concurrently or something like that. So it's just recognizing where my skill set ends and where somebody else's begins. So that's the first part. But the one thing that I like to try and find is where's the bright spot? Where in their lives do they give themselves permission to show up powerfully in a relationship? And maybe there are one or two relationships that they have where they don't fall into that place where they're contracted or anxious. And then it's just about helping them really understand what's happening for them in that place, because they've decided in their mind that it's okay for them to show up powerfully there, to show up in a certain way. And so there'll be times when I'm talking to him and he's telling me about how anxious and how frightened he is. And I'm like, well, you're not that way with me now. So let's understand what's happening here now, because you've made a decision that it's okay for you to show up a certain way. And then once they start to understand what those conditions are, we can bring some mindfulness to it and then just start to play with it. And even if it's like, hey, I get it. Like, you may not feel like it, you may not be in the mood, but what if you were to have a conversation with so-and-so the same way you talk to me? What if you were to just, like, there's nothing to lose, and really just get to understand what it feels like for you to play this role in that way, and just start to stretch that neurology and give themselves that chance to recognize that on some level it is a choice. When it's not unconscious, that they can bring some consciousness to it, they realize that they have a choice in the matter. And they already know how to do this. I think that gives guys a lot of confidence. It's not that they're starting from scratch. It's just like, well, you already know how to do it over here, so then let's expand it. And just that switch for a lot of guys can give them a ton of confidence, and they realize I'm not broken, I'm not fucked up, and I'm not, they get out of this story that they like to tell about themselves and realize, well, wait a second, I do know how. It's just a matter of doing it more. And I found that can be a great starting place for some of these guys.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, a lot of times people will come to me and say, how do I start a conversation? I'm like, well, you know how to talk. You already started. We're in conversation. Let's get your mind to settle down. There's usually generally too much thinking going on. Way too much thinking, way too much thought, way too much mind chatter.
And I want to blow a hole. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to blow a hole through, because I think that there's it's mistaken to believe that you either have this or you don't. And I think it's just more of a spectrum. It's like, well, I have this up to a point, and like for me, it's is it okay for me am I going to give myself permission to email this person or call that person or invite this person to a certain thing? That's where I will shut down. And that's where I'm playing with that edge. It's like, well, what's the big deal? This guy still takes a crap in the morning, puts his pants on and does whatever. Like, he's just a dude. What am I doing to treat him differently? And so I just want to, it's not either you have this or you don't, it's just a spectrum. And I think that helps too with whatever the limiting story is. It's just, well, here's your line and you get to grow it.
Yeah, I love that, man. Thanks for clarifying that and pointing that out, because something like shyness, I have it, which is like I am it. It's just an identification. It's just a particular state somebody gets into, and they may be living in that state quite a lot, but it's not fundamentally who they are. But to get somebody to see that can be challenging, takes some work, but to realize that identification, and we do it too, right? We go, who am I to email so-and-so? Who am I to reach out and call? Who am I? I'm this little bleepy beep, and he's this big blah, blah, blah. It's like, shit's made up, man.
Same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing. That's what I thought. That's what I thought you might say. No, that's what I think. I mean, that's what I too. And it seems so real. Even I'm like, ooh, I'm going to help these guys, and they all have this. And I'm like getting drawn into the story of it too. It's like, damn it. Language is so powerful, right? Mm. Cool. So I think it's probably a good point to start wrapping up. Where can they find you, find all your stuff, find out more, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, so they can really, and I'll make sure to put the links under the video and all that too, of course.
Yeah, the best resource out there is the New Man Podcast. You can go find it on iTunes. It's tons and tons of stuff. If you're lazy like me and you don't want to go through 170 plus whatever episodes, You can sign up and become a member of the New Man Life. It's free. It's thenewmanlife.com. And what I've tried to do is just condense so much of the things that I've learned over the years by doing these interviews, but also by coaching people and actually helping them out of these types of challenges. So thenewmanlife.com.
Cool. Awesome. And I've seen your stuff, and everybody should go check it out if you're watching this. It's awesome. It's how we came to be here today. I saw you over the years as well. So thanks so much for your time today. And if there's any last, I don't want to say words of wisdom because that's a lot of pressure, but a message that you'd want to communicate to somebody listening to this, what would it be?
Just have fun. Can you find a way to have fun with this stuff? I think that once it becomes big and overbearing and, oh my gosh, my whole life is hanging in the balance here, it's not fun. I've found that the growth happens so much quicker if we're willing to be playful and get over ourselves and just find the fun in it. It's amazing. It's amazing what happens when we allow ourselves to just have fun with the process and not take ourselves too seriously.
Yes, love it. Double fist bump. Bam. That's awesome. That makes me feel like, woo! Go have fun. Cool, man. Thanks so much, Tripp.
You're so welcome. Thank you, David.
And thanks, everyone, for watching. And we'll see you later. We're complete. Hey, if you like this video and want more tips and strategies on how to overcome your shyness, social anxiety, self-doubt, and really build the confidence in your social skills, conversational skills as much as you can, up to the best you can be, so you can have the career success, the social circles and friends, the dating life that you want, all that and more, subscribe to the Social Expression channel by clicking on the subscribe button, and check out the other videos here that are on offer. This channel is all about helping you be the best guy that you can, like I've done for myself, and I really want you guys to succeed. So keep watching.